This is Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, who chews the fat with entrepreneurs, startup founders and thought leaders on what it takes to traverse the wall between startup and scale-up.
Have you ever considered what it is that differentiates successful scale-up founders from the rest? Are you a founder or startup leader looking to understand the secrets to success? Stay tuned to this episode to find out. You're listening to Platform Diaries, and I'm your host, Shane Williams. Today I'm speaking with Mary Butler, a people strategy expert and international best-selling author who helps founders become legends and not liabilities. We discuss what is people strategy and why is it so important for scale-ups, some of the common people mistakes that scale-ups make, and the 4 key secrets that startup founders should take to enable them to scale. I trust you'll enjoy the interview. So Mary, thanks for joining me on Platform Diaries.
Hey Shane, good to be here.
Now, I'm just going to go straight in with the big picture here because this is a topic I'm particularly passionate about. I know you are too. So maybe you could help describe to the listeners, what is people strategy and why is it so important for scale-ups?
Yeah, people strategy really is the end-to-end holistic view of people within an organization or within a scale-up. And the reason it's important to look at people strategy is that it's once you can hire the right people in, it's really important that you can engage and retain them. And it looks at the whole employee cycle right from the very start, from when you're profiling people to get them in. And once they're in, once they're onboarded, it looks at careers, it looks at succession planning, it looks at learning and development, it looks at all the elements of retaining your people within a business. And the reason people strategy is really important as well is that it links really closely to business strategy. And I think that's what a lot of businesses forget about, is they try to do people strategy in isolation of business strategy. And so that's probably the most important point about people strategy, is that it must support your business strategy.
Yeah, right. And so I think one of the distinctions that's important for us to make today in that is, I guess, the differentiation between a startup and a scale-up. Would you perhaps give us your perspective on what you think that is?
Yeah, sure. So the OECD definition is that a company that has an average annualized return of at least 20% in the last 3 years and 10 employees at the start. But it's quite broad. And I think a metaphor that I like to use, or an analogy, is if we think about when you're starting up a business initially, there's only kind of you and your mates. And it's like a garage band. If you think of it like a garage band, you're kind of recruiting your friend who has a guitar and somebody else who has some other kind of like skills and capabilities that you think you need, and they're someone who's passionate about your idea, your concept as well, and think they can bring it forward. And as that grows, you see it with the garage band, you kind of get more members in the band, but somebody starts to kind of move to the leadership position, and then that's kind of when you move into like what we call the scale-up space, where it goes from being completely informal, working, odd hours, talking about working 24/7, move into a scale-up space is where we need to start putting some policies and procedures in place and some guidelines and some, directions about how things happen. So we become a little bit more discerning about who we're hiring, because we're no longer hiring our mates. We're now hiring people we don't know. We've got somebody stepping up into like a leadership or a management position. We've got, as I say, more procedures and stuff in place. And that's why I think it's a bit like a jazz band. So it's still got some guidelines that you have to follow, but it's got the opportunity to still improvise and be really flexible. What scale-ups, I think, are afraid of is moving into that corporate space, which is more like the orchestra. So you've got the conductor who's kind of out of the picture, not actually playing an instrument, but everybody knows their place and it's really strict and very established. And so scale-ups really play that part in the middle. And I think it's helping people understand that when you're hiring people who come straight from startup, they need to understand what's happening in a scale-up. But also, a lot of consultants in this space come from corporate and they don't understand scale-up space. And I think that's a really big difference. I think that's what it's really interesting for me, how I believe I can help my clients, is that I get that it's not traditional corporate HR. It's a very different way of looking at a business.
Yeah. And then if you think about some of the scale-ups that you've worked with, or just, I guess the industry in general, and talk about some of those challenges, like what are some of the common mistakes, people mistakes rather, that you think scale-ups make?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Shane. I think what I find people I'm speaking with, they rarely look at the people mistakes. They're aware of them, but they kind of don't want to deal with them because it's not their area of expertise. And they talk about, we got our go-to-market strategy wrong, or we got some product concept wrong. They just don't look at the people stuff. Now, the CB Insights from June 21 talked about the top 20 reasons why startups fail. And there's 6 of those are about people, and we really need to start reflecting on that. That's a huge percentage. And so, it's the founder, they lack passion, they lack focus, they're burnt out, they don't use their network. So there's a lot of things that are actually based on the founder in particular, and then how they grow their team. So as scale-ups are growing, there's some of the mistakes that happen at the founder level and some happen at the team level. So what happens at the founder level is the founder, things are getting really busy. They're starting to become a little bit more difficult to work with because they want to be involved in all the decisions. They want to get into the weeds of everything, become a little bit of a bottleneck as well. They can become quite controlling because this is their baby and they're starting to hear, it's a bit ugly. And how do they actually hold on to that? And sometimes actually they just let their ego get in the way. And I'm calling that straight out, because they're really, really clever people who are very driven, action oriented, all about results, and the ego can get in the way. So they need to learn to actually let go. But also personally for them, they need to start reflecting on what's happening for them. I know there's a fear of disappointment. I hear it with my clients all the time. I'm afraid I'm going to let my mates down. I'm going to let my family down. I'm going to let myself down because they're so driven. And then they become overstretched, overwhelmed, overworked. And a final thing really, I think for them as an individual is they need to just hold up the mirror and think, what role am I playing in why my scale-up isn't scaling or my business isn't scaling? What's happening here? Am I tied to old beliefs? Am I listening to people? Am I avoiding making some decisions? So the first one really, that's one. That's really about their identity, their brand, and who they are. The next big challenge really for them is what they're doing, what role they're playing. They need to get real clarity on the role. I hear it all the time. Role clarity is the biggest challenge because they're kind of going at the start, the garage band. Well, yeah, I can play drums, I'll give that a go. So they're kind of doing a bit of everything. And what they need to do is step back and go, what do I want to do? Because they also find themselves where they're doing all this day-to-day people stuff. I hear it all the time. It's like, I don't care where they sit. I don't care who takes a day off or whose turn it is. And they're dealing with all of this stuff, but they're kind of not letting go, but they don't know what role they want to play. So they need to establish as well what role they are playing. What are the boundaries? What are they not doing? And how are they communicating this? They need to communicate that to the team. Also, who are they working with and how well are they working? Like, are they easy to work with? Are they enabling people? Are they listening to advice? Is there, honesty, transparency? How good is their communication capability? So that's the founder as themselves, like what are the things they need to look at. So, how are they working? What roles are they doing? And who are they working with? And how well are they actually doing that? And what's their brand? The other piece really is they're not building the right team. So they're hanging on to, as Atlassian calls them, the brilliant jerks, the people they really need to get rid of. And they're holding on to them a bit too long. And they're kind of, they're my mates, I can't let them go, they've been here since the start. But those people are quite often miserable as well. They're getting disgruntled and they're just holding on to them. But also they're just not building the right team. They're out now, we know we've got a global talent scarcity, which is really quite very, very challenging for, any business trying to scale at the moment, as particularly in the tech area. But what they're doing is they're trying to hire the smartest people rather than the right people. And what I'm supporting my clients in doing is understanding what's that level of person that you need to get into your business. Why is it that you're trying to hire the top engineers, the top finance people? You don't need them all at that level. Just what can you afford and what will actually help you meet your business strategy and execute on that, rather than actually just trying to get the best people in, because they'll get bored and they'll want to leave as well.
And I know, like from experience, of myself and people I've worked with have all fallen into the trap of I need a senior or I need some person with a lot of experience. And yet we kind of disregard or perhaps don't even consider the opportunity to develop people in the organisation, give them some longevity with the business, give them something to, be proud of. Because I guess the tendency is there to go, I've got to go fast, I've got to go quick, I need people who know what they're doing. And I guess it's striking that balance, particularly in a market that's got, I guess, a deficit of talent right now.
Yeah, and absolutely that infrastructure isn't in place either. Because we said, if you think moving from startup to scale up, they don't have the infrastructure in place to support people. That's really key.
Yeah, I think the other thing you touched on there that I really resonated with was identifying the types of humans that you need. It's that you've gone from just, I've got a small network of people that I know that I can tap into, have particular skills to, well, now I need to tap into the market of people I don't know. So specifically, what am I looking for, and what are the gaps, and what are the things, rather than just a clone of who I had before and that sort of stuff. I think that's fascinating. So now I guess the obvious question is, if we look for, like, what's the shining star? What's the gold standard? Who's doing it well? And I guess why?
Yeah, so there's a client that I'm working with at the moment called Atomos, and they're in the video expertise area, so making anyone who has the equipment become a video expert. And what they're doing really well is they're doing a full reset of their team structure. Now, I need to highlight, this is not a reorg in terms of, losing people, but it's actually looking at the talent that we have. And it's kind of a talent review that we're doing. But what they're doing really well is they're starting with business strategy. And what happens is businesses often start at the other end and say, we all need job descriptions, and they start creating, well, what are you doing? And they create job descriptions to fit the people in the roles that they're in, which is the complete wrong end of the path, the roadmap that they should be working at. So what Atomos are doing really well is we're working on what's their business strategy, what are all the challenges that are coming up, what's the competition, what are the opportunities. And then we're actually just going to say, right, we've got a blank sheet of paper, we've got nobody in our business, what are the capabilities that we need? So I'm working at the moment with each of the execs across each of the functions to map out what are those technical capabilities. And it's not just looking at technical capabilities then. The interesting part is we're also now bringing in the behavioural capabilities, which is often missing as well because we just hire for technical capability at this level. We've got technical capability and behavioural capabilities. And of course, the values need to come into this as well. So they need to play a part. Values, guiding principles, whatever you want to call them. What we do then, and what we're doing, we're part of the way through this process now, is we're looking at, okay, so those are the capabilities we need. Now, who do we have? And a really good example is they introduced NetSuite last year. And rather than looking at, what capabilities were needed at the time, they actually said, well, actually, we're going to need a NetSuite person to come in here. We need some NetSuite capability because we're introducing NetSuite. And so they had that foresight to say, right, we need to make sure we've got the right people in place. And so quite often as well, when we're building these team structures, we just look at who we have today, what we need today. But Atomos is looking at their future structure and their growth and their strategy and what are the capabilities they need for the future and how do they have those people in place now. And I read something just recently from one of the VCs here in Australia just kind of saying, don't hire above what you need. I agree with that if you don't need it. But if you need it for your future strategy and there's a talent scarcity, you got to get those people in or you're not going to be able to do like a big implementation. So who do we have? And then finally, who do we need? So to meet that strategy, not everyone's going to fit in the same place, but there might be people actually getting kind of moved into better positions. But there's much more back to role clarity. So Atomos are doing that really well. They're doing those 4 steps really well.
I think that's an interesting one, hire for who you need. If you think about why would someone want to join your organisation, some will have the motivation of, I'm really good at what I do and I'm glad I'm inheriting something that I can just, maintain. But imagine a lot of people are looking for a stretch and an opportunity to show their worth. And I think, again, don't hire too far ahead. This is stuff that you don't need. But if it is something you need for your growth strategy, then why not bring someone in and go, hey, help us design that, help us deliver it. I think it's kind of part of the value proposition of looking for talent, right?
Yeah. And what it also, having this in place means we now have a good performance process in place. And again, it's not the corporate thing, but it is a good performance process. We've got a reference framework. So if there are any challenging behaviours, it's much easier to do that. But more importantly as well, around the positive side, the promotions. People are behaving in a way that's more senior to their current position. And so we can acknowledge that. We now have career paths in place. All of these things are available because we put these very basic frameworks in place. So it's nothing too complicated, but it's actually really, really useful for existing employees as well as future employees.
I agree. So then that probably takes me to, if you're the founder or even just a senior leader in a scale-up, what should you do today to enable scale?
Well, there are 3 things that I think that really link back to the common mistakes. So, I mean, obviously I came up with a really big, long, extensive list of common mistakes. And that's, as I mentioned, because founders and leaders in this environment don't come from a talent or a people background. And so what you can really do is there are three things that I find working with founders. I've got a program called Founder as Leader. Are you ready to lead? And what I ask the founders to do is understand, who do you want to be? So the first one is reputation. What's the identity that you want to have? How do you want to be known both inside the business and outside the business across the whole community? What's your internal brand? What's your external brand? What's that identity? But what's important to you? Are you doing the work that's important to you? Because this is probably why you started your business. And now you're probably doing all this day-to-day whack-a-mole people stuff that you just probably don't like and it's taken up all your headspace. So who do you want to be? What's that reputation? How do you want people to describe you? The second one is role clarity. What's the work you want to do? What do you not want to do? What are the boundaries? And how do you communicate these boundaries? Be really clear with people going, I've hired somebody to look after that. I'm not doing it. And remember, I mentioned earlier, you might be the bottleneck. So really be aware that you're handing some of this stuff off. Let it go. You need to be able to rotate out of roles about every 4 months, I believe, in this kind of startup spaces, is just, being able to let go and move on. So role clarity. What do you do? What do you not do? Are you doing the work that you love? The other piece there as an individual is relationships. So who's in your network and how well are you communicating with people? So what's your style of delivery? How clear is your message of delivery? You hear it all the time. There's no communication in this business. But what does that even mean? Is it the content? Is it the message? Be really, really clear on that. So you've got reputation, role, and relationship. The final one is your right team. Get the right team in place. Don't try to get the smartest people and don't try to fill gaps. Don't replace like with like. Just look at what's your future strategy and how do you actually build the right team to get them in place.
So you mentioned your program Founder as Leader, and I'd love to just dive a little bit into what that was and then maybe what's next for Mary Butler.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So working with my clients, what I've found is that the founder has a particular interest in learning more about how do they become a people leader in a strategic sense. Because as I mentioned, all of those challenges and mistakes and errors that founders make starting up a business, getting involved in all the day-to-day people stuff, they wanted to learn, how do I lead people? How do I work with people strategically? But how do I communicate with people strategically as well across whether it's investors, the board, the market, the community. And so stepping up into that much more leadership role. And so what I wanted to do is extend that Founder as Leader into a book. So I have a book. It's currently with the editor and it will be released in July this year. The book is currently called Legendary Leadership in Scaleups, which is a little bit of a mouthful. So I'm kind of working on that one. It's a bit of a work in progress. But it is about helping founders not become a liability in their business, but helping them become legends. Now, they're already legends because they've created this incredible business and they've had this concept and idea and product and service. So how do we help them become legends as people leaders? This is available on my website, marybutler.net, to pre-order. Get in and order today.
Awesome, Mary. Thank you. And I definitely will be putting in my pre-order. I appreciate your time and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks so much, Shane. What a great opportunity to catch up with you today. Thank you.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. To find out about how Shane enables digital businesses to scale, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Thank you for listening.